This is Duke University.
So good afternoon, everybody. It is well, thank you. It is a wonderful privilege and a personal pleasure to be able to introduce to you Secretary of Labor Perez. A couple of things before he takes over and gives the remarks you're waiting for. The first one is, I didn't get a chance to tell him this, but my first job out of college was actually working at the Department of Labor. And my job there was as a secretary. So I was a secretary at Labor. He is the Secretary of Labor. Just one small word kind of that sets us apart. So it is a wonderful thing to have him join us here. It's the case, as I said this morning, that one of our core values is impactful stewardship, and the idea of impactful stewardship is that you have to work across boundaries with other partners who are trying to achieve the common good. And so we have previously welcomed some of Secretary Perez's fellow cabinet members. We had Secretary of Education Duncan here about 2 years ago. We had Secretary of Veterans Affairs McDonald here this summer. And so now we're very thrilled to have Secretary Perez join us. There are a couple things that I think are important to note. He is the 26th Secretary of Labor, so there haven't been too many people in this role. He is running a very large and significant organization. So he has an organization where they have a budget of $12 billion, and he has 17,000 people working in that organization. But there it expands to, it's actually 125 million workers that are in his charge, in the Department of Labor's charge, in terms of what he is trying to accomplish in the private sector. So it's a wonderful example of the crossover between the public sector and the private sector. I'm just going to say a couple of other things about what he has said that I think really cue up the relevance of his presence here. The first one is that in terms of the whole idea of social impact, the whole theme of this conference and the previous 10 conferences that we've had on this topic is the idea of we have a responsibility to do good, to transform the world through business in a positive way. He has actually said that we have a responsibility not just to do well and to do good, but we have a responsibility to do well by doing good. And I think that's an important distinction. Not only do we have that responsibility to do well by doing good, but we have an incredible opportunity. And Secretary Perez recognizes that the key to that opportunity is leadership. And in fact, he has been quoted as saying that leadership is the most important step on the stairway to shared prosperity. And so as we talk about this idea of leaders of consequence who can bring people with them to do great things in the world, he is leading the way. He is one of those leaders of consequence. So he's going to come up here without further ado and give some remarks. But after he gives some remarks, there's going to be a conversation that Kevin Trapani will moderate with him. And so I just want to say a few words about Kevin Trapani. Kevin is the founder and CEO of the Redwoods Group, which is a group that provides, it's a B corporation, providing insurance risk management to YMCAs, to Jewish community centers, to residential camps, and so on. And Kevin is one of my personal heroes. He is someone who has inspired many, many of our students over the years with his mantra of do important work, do it well, and bring it to scale. So I look forward not only to Secretary Perez's remarks, but also the conversation between the Secretary and Kevin Trapani. So without further ado, Mr. Secretary.
Thank you so much. Hey, good afternoon. You've had a great day. I looked at your program, and I feel very humbled to be part of it. I have a question, though, at the outset, before I get going. How many of you are students? Okay, I have bad news for you. At the end of my remarks, I am going to give you a homework assignment. I taught at the University of Maryland, I taught at GW, and I can't help but do that. So sorry about that. You shouldn't have raised your hand. Dean Bowling, thank you so much. Thank you for your leadership. And this conference and the subject matter are really at the essence of what it means to be a thriving economy. So thank you for your leadership. And Kevin is, he's got game. And I look forward to having a chance to talk to him. And, you really have heard from some remarkable people here today. And we're really going to talk about, I think a fundamental principle of success, that socially responsible business enterprises prosper, not in spite of doing good, as you said, but because they do good. And, at the Labor Department, the first Friday of the month is a busy day because that's when we announce the job numbers. We do about 40 interviews, and it is really an important day in labor markets, in financial markets, et cetera. And last Friday was a pretty good day. And that's because if you haven't seen the numbers were very good once again. Over the last 6 months, we've had the best stretch of job growth since the late 90s. Over the last 12 months, we've had the best stretch of job growth since the late 90s. In the depths of the recession, there were roughly 7 job seekers for every job opening. Now there are 1.7 job seekers for every job opening. As I sit here right now, there are 5 million open jobs. In the depths of the recession, there were less than half that. Bless you. Bless all of you for that matter, okay? I like you, but I don't want to single you out, okay? You look at where we're creating the jobs. Some say it's all low-wage jobs. Well, the sector that grew the most in this last year was business and professional services. That's good for you all, by the way, okay? If you haven't figured that one out. Over 700,000 jobs in that sector alone. Auto sales last month were the highest they've been since January of 2006. If you work on an assembly line at a Ford plant or any other manufacturing facility, you work an average of 42 hours a week. You're getting overtime on average every single week. You look at construction, same thing. You're moving in the right direction. And you see all these numbers, and you can't help but look at the resilience of American businesses and the resilience of American workers and where we have come. Because again, in the 3 months before the president took office, the economy lost 2 million jobs. 2 million. And now we've had 59 consecutive months of private sector job growth. That's the longest streak on record, to the tune of about 11.8 million jobs. But I will be the first to tell you that this is not any time, and there's no one at the White House and no one at the Department of Labor or anywhere in the federal government that is sitting around spiking the football or patting ourselves on the back. Because while we have the wind at our back, we have a lot of work to do. Because I firmly believe, and the president firmly believes, that we all succeed only when we all succeed. And if you look at now, and I referenced the early 90s a number of times in terms of our job growth is as well as it's been since the late 90s. The difference between the late 90s and what we see now is that in the late 90s, the progress we saw and the prosperity that flowed from it resulted in shared prosperity. The rising tide lifted far more boats in the late 90s than it does now. And so really the unfinished business was very well outlined by the president in the State of the Union when he said, will we accept an economy where only a few of us do spectacularly well, or will we commit ourselves to an economy that generates rising incomes and chances for everyone who makes the effort? That's what the unfinished business is. How do we create shared prosperity out of the tailwind that we are experiencing right now? Because we indeed hold ourselves up as a nation of opportunity, and we have to make sure that that opportunity extends to everybody. And I categorically reject the notion that the only way to grow is on the backs of an approach that says low wages and no benefits. I categorically reject that because I have seen the American business at work. I've seen the resilience and the leadership and the foresight of so many businesses who reject those false choices between you either take care of your shareholder or you take care of your worker, but you can't do both. The employer who says, I either have a safe workplace or a profitable bottom line, but I can't do both. I categorically reject those notions. And if you don't believe me, you know, the guy who owned a coal mine that was the subject of the worst disaster in U.S. history over the last 50 years, who's currently a criminal defendant in a case, you know, when safety came second, you don't make a heck of a lot of money when your coal mine then shuts down in the aftermath. Penny wise, pound foolish, my parents always taught me. And so we reject false choices. And the unfinished business, you know, I'm sure you're sitting there thinking, well, he's the Secretary of Labor. You know, when he talks about income inequality and shared prosperity, I would expect to hear that from, you know, the Obama administration and all that. And you know what? What's interesting to me is to listen to what everybody else is saying right now. You know, on CBS This Morning last year, a person that I've gotten to be very good friends of said the following: too much of GDP over the last generation has gone to too few people. That person is Lloyd Blankfein, CEO of Goldman Sachs. You heard Janet Yellen say something very similar at a recent meeting of the Fed. Here's something else: a rising tide lifts all boats, but a lifeboat carrying a few, surrounded by many treading water, risks capsizing. And the question I ask you is, who said that? Well, that was Standard & Poor's last summer in a report explaining why income inequality is stifling GDP growth. There is a growing consensus that this is a major problem. And so the question presented for us is, what are we going to do about this challenge? How do we create shared prosperity from this tailwind that we are indeed experiencing? And you know, in other speeches, I have talked, and I could talk at great length and with great passion about that stairway to shared prosperity. And I talk frequently about the need to take certain steps that we could do and should do tomorrow, like the minimum wage, like passing and enacting overtime regulations. I talk a lot about how we need to upskill America. And earlier today, I was with some businesses here in Carolina who are doing just that, applying an apprenticeship model, because the education dividend is undeniable. The more education you have, the greater your chances of punching your ticket to the middle class. But you don't need a 4-year degree, and you don't need an MBA to punch your ticket to the middle class. And that was the focus of this morning, was talking about apprenticeship and how we extend and expand apprenticeship to help meet the needs of businesses, not simply in the skilled trades, but in IT and health, cyber, other occupations and sectors where the apprenticeship model, you know, I call apprenticeship the other college, except without the debt. Now, there's no one in this room who has debt, so you probably wouldn't know what I'm talking about. But anyway, you know, I could sit here and talk about all of these interventions that I think are critical to building an economy of shared prosperity. I could talk to you about immigration reform, the economic and national security and moral imperatives of immigration reform. But what I really want to talk to you about at most length here today is the issue of leadership, because you are, in some cases, today's leaders, and in many cases, tomorrow's leaders. And I really want to talk to you about this, because I have seen business leaders stepping up, and that's why I come to you with an unrelenting optimism. You know, everywhere I go, I have this Groundhog Day moment, and it's a good Groundhog Day moment, where business leaders tell me, Tom, you know what, I'm bullish about the future. I want to grow my business, and I want to bring business back home. Insourcing is in, outsourcing is out. This is the reality of what we're seeing across America, and what we need to create a society of true shared prosperity, in addition to all the other things I just described, is leadership. We saw a remarkable example of leadership in action last summer. Any of y'all from New England here? Snowing like hell up there. My sister got 70 inches in the last month. And my daughter's in Providence, and she thinks she grew up in Buffalo like I did. But that's another story. You know, those of you from New England may know the story of Market Basket. And last summer in New England, there was a different kind of storm. And there were thousands of employees. Market Basket is a regional supermarket. They have thousands of employees, hundreds of locations, mostly Massachusetts and New Hampshire. And there were a number of employees. By the way, there's a non-union shop. And employees, led by managers, walked off the job. Why did they walk off the job? They walked off the job to protest the firing of their CEO, Arthur T. DeMoulis. They call him up there Arthur T. Some people refer to him as the good Arthur, but I will simply refer to him as Arthur T. Workers up and down the chain of command. There was a dispute. There's Arthur D. DeMoulis said he was going to buy the company from Arthur T. DeMoulis. And there was a bit of a family feud that emerged. And workers up and down the chain of command, from baggers and stock people, supervisors and managers, they held rallies. People who shopped there because they had a reputation for good product at a decent price. They were going to other places and putting up their receipts, and they were taping it on the stores. There was an insurrection going on up there. And again, 8 managers lost their job, and some of them had been with the company for more than 40 years. They weren't willing, because the bad Arthur, I said I wasn't going to do that, but I just did it. He said, I want to change our business model. I want to raise prices, and I want to cut corners. And these folks who'd been there for 40 years said, you know what? You shouldn't do that. And in the end, the good Arthur won, because there was this insurrection. And their supply chain said, I'm not doing business with the other Arthur. And, you know, this isn't right. And this is a community resource. It ain't broke. Why are you trying to fix it? Why are you trying to put your shareholder over your stakeholders? And this is what the good Arthur said when he got the business back. He said to his workers and his community, you have demonstrated that everyone here has a purpose. You have demonstrated that everyone has meaning, and no one person is better or more important than another. Whether it's a full-timer or a part-timer, whether it's a sacker or a cashier or a grocery clerk or a truck driver or a warehouse selector, store manager, supervisor, customer, vendor, or CEO, we are all equal. By working together and only together do we succeed. This was Arthur T. upon return. He didn't treat his employees like they were just another cost to be minimized, but he treated them as an asset worthy of investment. In return for that, he earned their loyalty. And we had them into the DOL, and I asked them, did you know what was going to happen when you did this? And they said, some people had a one-word answer. No, other people had a two-word answer. Hell no. But they were willing to put 40 years on the line because they so believed in it. And he so built a culture. And what I have seen in this work, and this is a privilege, I have a hop in my step every day, and it's not simply because I had a knee replacement 2 years ago. I have a hop in my step because I go out there and I meet Arthur T's in my travels every single day of the week. Every week of the month, every month of the year. There are so many people, large employers, small employers, employers in between, who understand that treating people with dignity and respect is the right thing to do, the smart thing to do. And I was with the president about a month ago. We went to a diner. It's a wonderful small restaurant in Baltimore to meet with a business owner who pays her workers a decent wage, who gives them paid leave, who understands that, you know, if I want to build a loyal workforce, I need to treat my workers fairly. And she said, you know, I would want to see an increase in the minimum wage so that many more people in my community could spend money in the cafe. She may not have known this, but there's this other guy who said this about 100 years ago. He's a slightly larger business owner. His name was Henry Ford. When he doubled the wages of people on the assembly line, he did so for a number of reasons, starting with the fact that he had over 300% attrition, try to run a business with 300+% attrition, but he did it also because he understood that job creation is a joint venture between businesses and the middle class. And if people don't have money in their pockets, they can't spend it. And she understood this. One of my favorite people in D.C. is the owner of an Ace Hardware store. She pays her employees a decent wage. I go in there, I talk to them, and they tell me, you know what? I've been here for 3 years, and I ain't going anywhere because she treats me well. She treats me with dignity. And we value them as assets to the business because we know they are people who are on the front lines with our customers. She's a smart lady. Gina Schaefer is her name, and she is a leader. The CEO of The Gap, when explaining his company's plan to raise wages, said, and I quote, "Our instincts are that when it's all said and done, this is a race for talent. And if we have the best talent in our office, in our distribution centers, in our call centers, and most of all, in our stores, then we're going to win." And by the way, guess what happened after they did this? Their applications jumped. And there are studies that show when businesses do the right thing like this, their stock value actually increases. And when you're the first one to do it, your stock value increases even more. So you can do well and do good. I just spoke to the mayor of Philadelphia. You know what he told me? They just changed their formulary, their pharmacy that they were doing business with, and they decided to do business with CVS. Why? Because CVS decided not to sell tobacco in their stores. And the mayor of Philadelphia thought, you know what, that's good for my citizens. That's good corporate citizenry. And I want to demonstrate that that's good for your long-term business interests. And we see it everywhere. We see business leaders doing the right thing everywhere I go. And I met, when we did the Market Basket post, the review of Market Basket, I met a woman named Zeynep Tan from the Sloan School at MIT. And she has written a lot about this because she understands, and she has what she calls that good job strategy. And she's talked about this. And she talks about companies like Costco, you know, where employees there earn about 40% more than employees at the company's largest competitor, and they have very generous benefits. And nearly all the store managers, as you probably know, are promoted from within. And meanwhile, equally importantly, sales per employee at Costco are almost double that of their competitors, and the company has not had to satisfy, as you know, their commitment to low prices. I have a Costco card that's so old that I had hair, and it's right in my wallet right now. And by the way, and if you're sitting there and you're a skeptic and you're saying, oh, that's fine, Tom, but you know, he's doing that at the expense of his shareholders, I beg to differ. Shareholders, if you had bought $1,000 worth of Costco stock in '85 and did nothing with it other than hold on to it, you'd have $15,650 in the bank today. Now compare that to the ROI for the S&P 500 at the same time, which was $87.70 for that same $1,000 investment. And then you might be saying, oh, Tom, that's not apples to apples. What about the retail industry? Well, they have outperformed the retail industry as a whole, growing almost 25% faster. You can treat your customers well, you can treat your shareholders well, and you can treat your workers well if you take that stakeholder approach to leadership and not that narrow shareholder approach. And that is what she has talked about. And by the way, I see this in every business sector in the country. You know, I was with Cory Booker up in New Jersey, and we went and talked to low-wage workers, and we met a bunch of folks who are now working at these legacy carriers. You know, in the old days, if you were a baggage handler, that was a middle-class job. And these folks were making the minimum wage. Well, you know what? If you drive down I-95 to BWI Marshall Airport and go to Southwest Airlines, guess what? Their baggage handlers are not outsourced, and they do make a decent wage. And by the way, go look and see what airline did the best over the last 10 to 15 years in terms of domestic carriers. You will see Southwest at or near the top of that list. Anyone been to Shake Shack? Don't tell the First Lady, okay? Because it's pretty caloric, and their milkshakes are delicious. And Randy Garutti is a fantastic leader. I've gotten to know him for a while. I got the president to go to one of his Shake Shacks in DuPont Circle. He didn't tell the first lady. And guess what? One of the best IPOs in the last month was, guess who? Shake Shack. The burger business is not premised on low wages, no benefits. Their workers there, they get a bonus at the end of the month depending on what they're doing. Their managers there, the frontline managers have been there for years because you know what? The average person's making like $42,000, $43,000 a year, and that doesn't include the bonuses. Their frontline workers stay because they're treated well. He's taking that high road business model to scale in an IPO that was off the charts. You can do well and do good. Anyone from the Midwest? Ever been to Quick Trip? Quick Trip. That's like, you know, how could a 7-Eleven type place ever be profitable by doing anything but minimum wage and no benefits? Answer, go to Quick Trip. Because they've figured it out. They know what they're doing. I could do this all day. Because in every single sector, I can give you ample examples. Anyone from the West? Anyone been to In-N-Out Burger? Now that's a cult following. You guys are just like, you guys, there you go again, you know? Now you got the shakes, because I just said In-N-Out Burger. And guess what? Hundreds of locations, cult following, and look what they do. So every single sector, I can give you examples. And then there are people, you know, the B Corp movement. And, you know, you heard it this morning. I was up at 7th Generation. I got one of those water bottles. Did he throw them at you this morning? I hope so. Good, because he is a leader, and he understands it. You know, and they understand. Their philosophy, as you heard this morning, is you aspire to do well by doing good. I had a conversation a week ago with the CEO of Patagonia. You know, she worked in the private equity world. She was in a different line of work, and she kind of had, you know, a come to Jesus chat with herself. And she said, I want more. I want to be able to do well and do good. And let me give you some of the facts and figures of Patagonia since she took over. Since she joined the company, the scale of operations has doubled and profits have tripled. And she hasn't had to sacrifice the commitment to the workforce. So people at Patagonia get paid maternity leave, paid paternity leave. Workers in the retail stores make a minimum of $10.63 an hour. They cover 100% of their health insurance premiums, and their commitment to environmental stewardship is unparalleled. And then there are companies that use the ESOP model, the Employee Stock Ownership Plan model. And I've met many of those. Any of you drink beer here? Any of you drink but don't want to admit that you drink beer? Just go like this. Okay. Hey, next time you go to the store, go get some New Belgium beer, okay? The owner of the New Belgium brewery, she's got game. And you know what? Her workers are going to punch their ticket to the middle class because they're already doing so, and they're going to do so for some time to come because she's an ESOP. And she's part of the B Corp movement. And you know what? They're right in the middle right now of constructing a new brewery here in North Carolina. So, yeah, she's got game there. She's got game right here in North Carolina. So, you know, there are so many different examples. And there are so many ways where business leaders I have seen exercise commitment. One of my favorite people in the world is Randy Lewis. He was a former senior executive at Walgreens. Randy had the privilege of having as one of his sons someone who is on the autism spectrum. And Randy made it his life work. And what transformed Randy was seeing the potential in his son and the frustration of the fact that too many people in the business world look at the word disability and they focus on the first 3 letters and ignore the last 7 letters. So what Randy did is he said, you know what? We're going to change this paradigm. And I went up to Connecticut a while back. I visited their distribution center. They distribute every product sold in a Walgreens store from Maine down to Baltimore. And there's a distribution center down in South Carolina that does the same thing down here. And 40% of the workforce were people with disabilities making a minimum of $15 an hour or more, working side by side with the rest of the workforce, and that is one of their most productive distribution centers, debunking the myth that people with disabilities can't do it. That's leadership. And now he is evangelizing elsewhere. So places like Lowe's and other retail outlets, they're doing the same thing. That's leadership in action. You know, there are companies that exercise leadership in partnership with unions. And I visited a Ford plant in Louisville, Kentucky. You know, they had an existential crisis in 2007. They were down to less than 1,000 employees. They weren't sure they were going to stay open. And together, the UAW and Ford, they came together around a plan of shared sacrifice leading to shared prosperity. You look today, they've got 4,400 employees and counting, and that doesn't include the supply chain. They came together, UAW and Ford, working together around that plan, and that worked. And you contrast that with some of the workers that I've heard about at the Nissan plant. You know, they are, I don't understand this term, but it's called a perma-temp status, where you are basically a temporary worker, you know, almost in perpetuity. And God forbid, I'm not kidding, God forbid, if you get hurt on the job, you know, God forbid you get sick. You know, God forbid, you know, your kid gets sick or in a car accident because you got no security. That's not who we are as Americans. That's not leadership in action. I was in Wolfsburg, Germany, visiting the Volkswagen senior leadership. You know, co-determination is their key DNA of success. They are the 7th largest company on the planet. And the key to their success is co-determination. They have a works council model in place. And they have a manufacturing footprint in about 20 countries around the world, including China, including Russia. And they have the works council model in place in every single country in the world, except the United States. That is a fact. Because they tried, but you probably know the story. And as a result, they're doing a better job in Russia, they're doing a better job in China, but they don't have it in place here in the United States. Notwithstanding their leadership, that's not a Volkswagen issue, that was another issue. And these companies that I've described, I mean, they've all demonstrated that the high road is the smart road. And that's why I come to you to say, you know, this is really your day, because I need you to take the smart road. And I see so many other companies and so many other folks in the business world who understand, and there's this growing movement of impact investors who are willing to bet on these companies. Because, you know, as I've said, I hope you understand, these folks who are doing this are not, they understand what they learned in business school, which is that, you know what, if you don't pay attention to monetizing, and if you don't pay attention to taking care of business, then you're not going to do business. But you can do it in a way that results in prosperity for all, or you can do it in a way that results in, you know, the quarterly vortex of short-term returns. That's what a CEO said to me. You know, it's harder for me to think long-term, Tom, because I keep getting sucked into the quarter-by-quarter earnings vortex. That was not me talking. That's a Fortune 100 CEO talking about the challenges. Another Fortune 50 CEO who said to me, you know what, Tom, I get all these pressures. I want to raise wages so that I can compete for talent, my most important resource. And I've got this renegade shareholder telling me, you know, don't do that because that's going to compromise the next quarter's return. And I said, I'm looking out for the long term. And I think I'm right. And that guy says in response, and I quote, I'd rather be rich than right. Those are the challenges confronting business leaders today. Those are the challenges that will be confronting you tomorrow. And I am confident that as you move forward, that you will understand and take away the values you learn, not only today, but throughout your experience. Because I really believe that you are, and the reason I was excited to come here is because you are the pipeline of tomorrow. I mean, you have really an opportunity to follow in the footsteps of all of these folks that I talked about, you know, and they inspire me day in and day out. And you have that same opportunity. And the staircase to shared prosperity is only going to be constructed if we have leaders who think long term, if we have leaders who understand that we should be in a stakeholder economy, not a shareholder exclusive economy. The leaders who understand that we reject false choices and we can do good by our workers, we can do good by our shareholders, and we can do good by our customers. And my mother is saying, Tom, it should be well, not good. But I'm going to go with good. You can create a corporate culture where your employees feel like they are part of your team. You know, that's what Arthur T did. I mean, it's remarkable. Bless you again. But not a third time. That's what he did. You know, you can reject the instant gratification of short-term returns. And this really brings me to my final thing, which is, and you thought I forgot, those of you who are students, which is, you know, your assignment. And I quite seriously used to assign this the second last day of class to all of my students back in the day. And my assignment for you is to write your own obituary. And the purpose of that exercise, when I gave it, was because, you know, I want you to reflect now, not on your deathbed, about what you want your legacy to be. When I taught in law school and at the GW School of Public Health, I periodically met folks, you know, who knew exactly why they were on the planet Earth, and I periodically met folks who were still trying to figure that out, and that's, whether you're in the latter or the former, that's fine. But you got to think about it. And we sometimes get sucked into the vortex of, well, there's all these companies coming, and there's all these pressures here, and I don't think about it, and suddenly it's 10 years down the road, and oh, I'm going to do good in 15 years after I do this, and 15 years later you got 3 kids and a big house and a fancy car, and it gets harder and harder and harder. So you got to think about it now. And ask yourself the question, why were you put on the planet Earth? I feel very fortunate. You know, I'm the youngest of 5. All of my brothers are doctors. After I watched my one brother operate, they peeled me off the ground. I figured that's probably not for me. But, you know, what my parents taught me, and my dad worked himself, you know, to an early grave. I was 12 when he died. And what they taught me was, you know, the ladder's got to be down. And at the end of your life, you want to measure yourself by how many other folks you've helped. If you want to, you know, they used to say, you want to get to heaven, you better have letters of reference from poor people. And you know what? I've tried to take that to heart. And, you know, I would encourage you, you know, to write your obituary, you know, and I hope that what you will write is, you know, I was a transformational leader, not simply a transactional person. I hope you will write that, you know, you lived a life of purpose. And I hope you will write that you were indeed, in the greatest tradition of this business school, a leader of consequence. So thank you much, and I look forward to your questions. And again, thanks for having me.
The only thing I knew I could pull off for sure was have you sit in the correct chair.
Excellent.
I got specific instructions. Thank you so much. That was fantastic.
My pleasure.
Oh, my goodness. And by the way, thanks for making all those millions of jobs. That was really cool to pull that off.
Just don't call it the Perez economy.
Okay.
That's not right.
All right.
No.
So I got to start at the beginning. In my experience, that kind of passion for the specific way you picture the role of business in society was formed somehow. You don't just come to that on the verge of making a speech at Fuqua. What is it about your life experience that helped you to understand what's possible in the way that you do?
You know, we're all a product of our life experiences. My maternal grandfather was the ambassador to the U.S. from the Dominican Republic. And then in the 30s, there was a brutal dictator there. And after the massacre of the Haitians, he spoke out against him and was declared, as we say in Spanish, non grata. So my folks They were kicked out. My dad was a rabble-rouser. He kind of got kicked out. And they came to the States, and the States, you know, gave us so much. My dad served in the Army, got drafted as a legal immigrant. And as my mother was one of 9, and all of her brothers served. And they served with great pride in the U.S. Army as legal immigrants. And they taught us that, you know, to he or she whom much is given, much is expected. And you know, the mark of success is whether you can build shared success. And so I guess that was probably the main thing. And that motivated me to want to figure out a life plan that would enable me to, you know, expand opportunity. It's fun when you, I mean, I think all the time about people I come in contact with. You know, any one of you could have been a long-term unemployed person, and I met so many of them. And you know, I think about Catherine Hackett all the time. You know, single mom of 2, both her kids are in the military. One is, I don't know if he's still in Afghanistan, but you know, was there for a while, walked into work one day, white-collar job, services are no longer needed. And you know, we met one day because she introduced the president at an event, and we just stayed friends. And you know, she'd write me and I'd write her, and she'd talk about her poverty of spirit. And you know, she'd apply and be told no, and the longer you're out, the harder it is. And you know, I refer to DOL as Match.com. You know, we try to match job seekers who want to punch their ticket to the middle class with employers who want to grow. And we were able to use one of the tools in our workforce toolbox to help her get a job. And I went with Governor Malloy of Connecticut to visit her at her place, and she's got a hop in her step. And you know, if you want to know what the dignity of work means, talk to someone who's been out of work for a while, because you don't just lose a paycheck, you lose your identity. You lose, when you can't provide for your family, you lose a sense of purpose. And you know, so that motivates me because we're doing better, and I'm proud of the progress we've made, but there's still way too many folk who, you know, just are trying hard, but we still have some slack in the economy, and we still have a ways to go.
Well, we're all grateful that the lessons you learned from your upbringing, which are powerful, right, that you chose to deploy in this way, and that you see the power of business to do good, right? An awful lot of people
Absolutely.
will say, the choice I have is I want to do good, so I got to be in the nonprofit world, or I want to make money in the for-profit world. And you talked about false choices.
Yeah.
And you've said that you've encountered them throughout your career. How do you fight the false choices?
Well, 2 observations I want to make from that question. I mean, I have spent time in a number of spaces. I've had the privilege of working in the Civil Rights Division of the Justice Department, working here, working in local government. And, you know, people, I'm sure, followed the world in the events in Ferguson and elsewhere. And I spent a good part of my life working with police departments that had chronic problems, trying to fix them. And there's often a false choice between we either keep our community safe or we protect the Constitution. I did a lot of work in the mortgage space, in the foreclosure space, and there was in the mid 2000s when there was really little or no regulation. There was this. The premise of that was you either have a sound climate for business lending or you overregulate. Right. And I'll never forget when I was negotiating what was the second largest settlement in the case with a company, and the CEO is a great guy, and the company is a good company, very good company. You know, he was sharing with me the fact that his biggest challenge during this era in question was that he was losing his best people to Countrywide. Countrywide was the industry bottom feeder for years. They had no rules. You could get away with anything. They were particularly abusive in African American and Latino communities, and there was no cop on the beat. You know, if you put on a speed limit 45, self-enforcement, guess what? A lot of people are going to speed. And he was saying, you know what? I lost my best people to Countrywide because in 2 years they could basically retire for life because there were no rules. So that was another false choice. And you know, and I see false choices every day. You know, we can either have a safe workplace or I have profits. And, you know, I told you the coal mining example. Just a week ago, we issued a series of citations against one of the largest furniture manufacturers in the country. And I can't for the life of me understand why they would put their brand at issue. They've had chronic problems. And I'm not going to say their name because it's not relevant to this discussion. But why a company would allow their brand to be put at issue? I mean, last incident was, you know, someone lost 3 fingers. And, you know, anyone who goes to work in the morning has the right to go home at night safe. That's an article of faith.
Hear, hear.
And I don't understand why you wouldn't do that. And I talk to responsible business owners who always say that, you know, good safety is great profits.
Right.
And they understand that false choice. And I guess I would end with an observation about, you know, you said, well, we're in business and I'm in this other perch. And, you know, Randy Lewis, getting back to him, he said to me one thing that always resonated, which was, you know, Tom, we may play different instruments, but we're in the same orchestra. And I really think that too. And, you know, you may go, so some of you, I think, you know, got a couple jobs in consulting, and I think that's great because you can do so much important work there. Some of you may go go to a company, to one of the businesses I mentioned. You know, you're going to have a lot of pathways. But regardless of what pathway you choose, I hope you will remember that you are in that same orchestra and you have a really important ability and opportunity to put your imprimatur, your values, in action in a way that is totally consistent with fiduciary obligations and bottom line responsibilities. But, you know, we need you to be part of this movement that says, you know, we can take a stakeholder and inclusive democracy, inclusive capitalism view of the world and make it work.
Yeah, well, we say at Redwoods all the time, you can only lead from where you stand, but you must lead. Yeah. So which is where you're going. Let me close with this because I know anybody have another minute or two? Is it, you got appointments or phone calls? Yeah.
We're okay.
We could keep you here forever, by the way. Yeah.
And if there's a question or two from there, I'm happy to take a question from the
That would be great.
audience.
Is that okay? Can we do that? All right, I'll give you one more and you guys queue up a question or two. Is that fair?
Perfect.
So you are big time fired up about B corporations, which is cool. At being a guy who runs a B corporation, I think that's great. Thank you for your support. Why? Why?
Well, because I met him. I forgot, what was the company, when I was in Vermont, they have like 50% market share in the world of chocolate chip cookie dough ice cream. They do the chocolate chip. And,
right. Supplied by Jerry's.
And so they've got a global footprint. And, pardon? Thank you, Rhino. I have their hat.
They're from my hometown.
There you go. And he used to be the hockey coach at UVM. And I think he got fired. And he said, I probably need to do something different. So he opened up an ice cream shop. And he thought, I probably need to do more to make a living. And then his big break was he got the contract to supply Ben & Jerry's. And then the rest was history. And, you know, you go in there and you talk to folks, and he's doing very well. I mean, he's doing incredibly well. They're opening up a production facility in Ireland, I believe. It's Ireland or somewhere in the UK. You know, you go in and you talk to the employees. How long have you been here? Oh, I've been here since he started. Oh, I've been here since a year after he started. And, you know, the cost of turnover is significant, you know, and there have been a number of studies that have showed, you know, how much it costs to train someone. And, you know, when I see B Corps there, I've never met an employee of a B Corp who wasn't fiercely loyal to their employer for good reason. Because, again, it's the quintessential example. And I think the challenge, really, for the movement, the B Corp movement, is how do you scale? Mm-hmm. Because, you know, people look at Patagonia and they'll say, oh, that's just sort of California, you know. And, you know, those people. And you know what? That's no. I mean, this is not, she did not check her business school education at the door when she went to Patagonia.
Right.
In fact, I would assert that she put many of the principles that she learned in business school to great work in building a company that is doing well and doing very good.
Well, if you're doing important work, your obligation is to scale.
Yeah.
Right? Because it benefits everybody. How about questions from the crowd? You want to ask questions, because if you don't, we're going to just go on all day.
There's one over there.
I wanted to hear your opinion on workers' cooperatives, where workers are part owners and part managers of the business, and they work on a producer's basis. So, you know, not just people paying to be in a to buy stuff collectively, but to actually work on a factory floor, in an office, what have you, to actually provide something.
I mentioned in my remarks the store that, the restaurant that the president and I went to about a month ago. And the purpose of that visit was she, among other things, provides paid leave to her employees. And by the way, we're I think like the only industrialized nation on the planet that doesn't have some form of federal paid leave. I mean, we're just totally behind the rest of the world. She's a co-op. And you know, she is doing very well. She has a very loyal customer following. She's been able to do it. And my basic point is, there are various ways, and I hope if you take one and only one thing away, there are various ways to ensure that that you run a business in a way that does well for your bottom line, does well for your workers, does well for your shareholders. In some cases, it's you know, Ford working with unions. In other cases, it's you know, Arthur T. and the culture that he built. We have B Corps, we have ESOPs, we have co-ops. There are many models, and by the way, we have models that we haven't thought of yet. And I'm confident that there's some folks in this room who, you know, may travel abroad and find a new model somewhere and bring it home to here. And I think the more flowers that bloom, the better off we are.
Let's take one more. Yes, sir.
At the start of this administration, there was a great debate about something called green jobs. Can you give us an update in terms of how we're doing now in terms of the green economy and jobs as a part of the growth that's happening in the country today?
Sure. You know, part of one thing I didn't mention in terms of the wind that's at our back is, you know, the energy situation. I mean, I just filled up last weekend, and I think it was $23. I haven't paid $23 in a long time. You know, that's partly due to the fact that we're the largest oil and gas producer in the United States, in the world. It's also due to the fact that we have taken wind and solar to scale at levels that have never happened in our nation's history. And I was in Ohio, and I visited an apprenticeship program where people are being trained to repair and install wind turbines because wind power is really taking off. So all of the above strategy and the particular focus, and by the way, we're not only producing more energy, but we are also consuming less because you know, the fuel efficiency standards, and that's an equally important but often overlooked aspect of what's happening in that context. But those opportunities are remarkable, and I think that, you know, the challenge here right now in this context is to not get sucked in by the low gas prices and make the mistakes of history where you suddenly everyone goes back and buys the big fat SUV that they don't really need, and we don't invest in the alternative fuels because, you know, those who don't study history are bound to repeat the mistakes, and you know, there is a little bit of a roller coaster here, and so I know this president is firmly committed to the all of the above strategy, and that's not only good for our national security and our economic security. You know, I think it's phenomenal for our environment and for job creation.
Well, I'm sorry that we have to close up. We have taken more of your time than anyone planned, but we're so grateful for you, both for being here, which is just a great honor.
It's an honor to be here.
But for carrying this message widely. To have a man with your passion for the role of business in society being for good is incredibly powerful. Thank you for all you're doing.
Well, thank you, and have a great year.